All right, so this is the Intro to ZBrush workshop. I'll only be going over very basic tools and only the tools we'll be using for photogrammetry, optimization, and design. So if you haven't opened up ZBrush before, this is what it looks like when you open it up. Automatically, there's this drop-down pop-up menu that is just open. For simplicity's sake, I will show you the way you would import an object or a model in without it being too confusing. So this is open up for you already. If you don't have this open, you can just toggle it in Lightbox. Lightbox is like this folder. In the default projects tab, you can, if you click and drag, you'll actually like grab a hold of it and drag it across. Double click on this project, which is called Dynamesh Sphere 128.zpr. It'll open up, it'll open this up, and this is just the default project that ZBrush has in its native files. And it's just a sphere, really, built so people can just start modeling. Okay. In terms of the interface, the left side here are usually where you can control what types of brushes you're using, the color, and then whatever the brush shape you want it to be. We won't be touching these too much, but that's just where that is. There's this top bar here with the top menu. These are pretty much the project settings or project file settings, and they can also control different properties of different things like export settings, for example. The one that we care about is down here, it's Z plugin. And we'll be using Decimation Master, which is right here, and as well as maybe Subtool Master, but maybe it might not. Subtool Master, we'll be using it just to export our models, while Decimation Master will be used to decimate. And I'll get into that again later. On our right side here, this menu is a little bit funky, sometimes hard to get used to. This is actually a scrollable menu that you click and drag. It doesn't work if you use your mouse scroll. You have to click and drag the menu up and down, like you're actually grabbing hold of it and dragging it. That's the only way you can navigate this. As well as all these little labels here are actually submenus that you can open up, and it'll open it up for you and close the other one. By default, you should have the subtool menu open. If it isn't, then you can just click subtool and you should see like a little thumbnail of your model. And these are all the things. Up here, if it doesn't appear up here, then if you hover over your model, it'll actually like enlarge the thumbnail view of it, and it'll tell you your poly count and your points. So that's important when we, import the photogrammetry model in and see that. In terms of navigation, so that's it for the interface for all we care about. Oh, there are these move translation tools up here. These are similar to Maya or Blender, right? If I click move, I'll get a gimbal to move along whichever axes. Scale, I can scale it by click and dragging these rectangular squares. And then there is rotate, which, are the circles, right? So that's the same. By default, it's on draw, and I'll get into that why that is. For navigation, and this is your workspace. And depending on what version of ZBrush you have, this is ZBrush 2020, which will have this kind of little like icon, the silhouette icon in the top left. And then you'll have this little geometric model in the top right. Any other ZBrush version, like 2019, 2018, won't have these. These are not really important though, and if they really bother you, you can click and drag the corner of this one, make it really small. This one, I don't know how to get rid of, but I think it's somewhere in the preferences that you can play with. Anyways, so this is your main workspace. To navigate, and this is a little bit confusing if you're just using a mouse and keyboard. This makes a lot more sense if you're using, let's say, like a tablet and a drawing pen, like a drawing tablet, but this is still manageable with mouse and keyboard. So to rotate around your model, right, orbiting with the camera, it is outside, clicking outside of your model and holding right click. So you can see, or you can tell, it's a circle, but the top right icon there is rotating around because I am click and dragging this with my right click. Okay? Okay. To pan around your object, it's holding Alt and left click. Again, outside of your model. See? Okay. And then to zoom, zoom is Alt right click, wait, Control right click, drag, and that's how you zoom. And these are all clicking outside of the model. Yeah. Only for the panning. Well, actually, you can use Alt and right click as well. Okay, so it doesn't matter. So Alt and right click to pan. Just click and drag right click to rotate, and Control right click to zoom. And that can be anywhere on the screen. Okay, so you'll notice as I was navigating, our little top right geometric head was rotating as well. You can also navigate through this way. I'm just left click dragging, and this will actually position my model to whatever default orientation that ZBrush has, and it'll snap. This snaps to whatever view at a 15-degree increments, I think, or 45-degree increments. You can also click these arrows, which will navigate like so. For free navigation is just the hotkeys I was telling you about. So right click to rotate, Alt right click to pan, and Control right click to zoom. Okay, so if you use a control of this, or a combination of these, you can easily do that. Now, if you notice that maybe as you're rotating, the pivot of where you're rotating is a little bit off center. So you can see right now, mine is off center. Like it's, I'm not rotating around my object. So that's why it's being a little offset. I can recenter that focus if I just left click on the model. There's a quick left click, and that should maybe click and drag. Okay, that should help with the focus of your thing. And then I'm going to Control Z that because I don't want to draw on my model. So in general, innately ZBrush is used as a sculpting program, as a modeling program. So I can actually sculpt forms here. The command for recentering is just, you can press F, right? Just like Maya to fit screen your model, but doesn't really recenter your focus. To recenter your focus, just left click and like draw on the model a little bit, and it should sort of refocus it a little bit better. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, as I was saying, ZBrush is created as like a modeling tool and a program, so you can actually like freely sculpt things, and you can like make characters or whatever. These are the features we will not be using for photogrammetry optimization because we don't need to. But that's just the what ZBrush is for. So So I'm going to Control Z that. Up here, you'll notice a little orange bar that's been increasing as I was making edit points. This is actually your undo bar. So I can click and drag this, and I can go back in time, and I can go back forwards, which is pretty nifty if you have a lot of undos. Keep in mind there is a cap, right? I think it's like 50 or 200. You can change that also in your preferences for undos. You can make that infinite or not, but it's not really a big deal. Anyways, okay, so there's that, navigation, tools. And also by default, you'll notice that, when I hover over my model, I have two different red cursors that are following, sort of like they're mirrored. This is the mirror tool. And to turn that off, because, that gets into issues later on when we're trying to optimize, because, photogrammetry models aren't symmetrical or perfectly symmetrical. So we try to preserve that detail. We want to turn off symmetry, and you can do that by pressing X. Now we only have a single cursor. And it'll turn, if you want it back on for whatever reason, you just put on X again, and it'll turn on symmetry. But we want it off, so I'm going to press X to turn it off, to toggle it off. So now, right, when I draw, there's no symmetrical thing, which is perfect. Okay, now we know about our interface, we know about navigation. Let's, do some hands-on stuff. And so what I'll do is actually I'll import. So I put up here a tool. I will import my OBJ model. And let's see if I can go find it. Okay, I'm going to use the Flask. Yes, I'm going to use the Flask. As an example, because it's a relatively lower poly than our actual scans. Okay, so I imported it in. You'll notice that it is not oriented right, but that doesn't really matter too much. You can reorient it right now if you want, but there's no need. So first step, just like the other steps in Maya or Blender, we're going to duplicate this model. So you can do that by going down here and clicking duplicate in the subtool menu. So we'll duplicate it. We're going to unhide, or we're going to hide our top model group like that. So that's going to be our original, and we can rename things as well by selecting it. You'll know it's selected when there's a darker gray highlight, and we can rename it here by clicking that. I'm going to name it original, enter, and then I'm going to click back down to our working model, and I'm going to rename it to like working model. Okay, so we don't get confused. Awesome. So we have it duplicated. It's here. First steps, we want to make sure that the geometry doesn't have any like holes, or there's no like floating artifacts and things like that. So I'm just rotating around and checking to see if it's okay. And it looks fine. And if I'm unsure about it, I can always go through some of the optimization tools. So I'm going to go down here into geometry, and then I am going to go to modify topology. Okay, let's open up this menu. Here, I'm going to hit weld points. This will weld any points that are on top of each other. As well as here, I can do some cropping. So if I want to crop this bottom platform that the Flask is sitting on, I can do it in two different ways. So I can either use my selection tools. This is what I showed in the last workshop. So if I hold Control Shift, you'll notice this changes here. Right? I have a select rectangle, and if I click on this, I can change the shape of what I wanted to select that. So right now, default is in a rectangle, but I can go down here to a lasso tool, and now I'll have a lasso. You can only access these selection tools by holding Control and Shift. right? And you'll notice my cursor in the viewport changes color into a white. Here, with the lasso tool, I can go click and drag my lasso selection, right? So when I select it, you'll notice that everything else disappears, like an isolation kind of view. I can reverse that by holding Control Shift and click and dragging. All right, so now it's inverted that selection. And then with that selection hidden, right, I can go over here to delete hidden. And now that part is deleted, right? And that's essentially how you would crop. So I'm going to just quickly do that here. I'm going to Control Shift. I'm going to click and drag my lasso tool. And then I'm going to Control Shift, click and drag. All right, now it's inverted. I'm going to delete hidden. So that tool is great for, getting rid of huge chunks of the model. But let's say we want to get in closer, right? We can zoom in closer, and we could do the lasso tool, but it may not be as fine. We might be afraid of cutting too close. And maybe I should mention this as well. Let's say I accidentally select part of the model, right? And I don't want that selected at all. You can get rid of that selection by holding Control Shift and just clicking on it. Control Shift and clicking on the outside of your model, and this will just bring and reset your entire selection. But let's say we want like a finer selection. We can do that with the masking tool. So if I hold Control, just Control, you'll notice that my cursor is now turned yellow. And if I hold and drag left click, you'll see that I'm painting this dark gray color or shade on the model. That is my mask. And so what I can do with the mask is that I can invert the mask. So the part that I want to delete will be lighter than the rest of the model. To invert your mask, I'm going to hold Control, and then I think it's left click on the model. Oh no, Control and click and drag outside the model. Wait, what? Wait, I have a brain fart right now. What? Just give me a sec. Okay. Wait, I was right. What? I'm so confused. Okay, so it should be holding Control and left clicking outside the model. Oh, okay, cool. That worked. And that inverts your mask. Once it's inverted and you have this part of the model that is highlighted, and if you do notice that you missed like a spot, you can just hold Control and like paint that dark again. From the masking. Yes, so the earlier technique was using the selection tool. And you can use that as well, and you can go and find a detail. And if that works for you, you can just use that. Like, that's totally fine. But if you're, having trouble, with the selection, maybe you have like a shaky mouse or a shaky hand, so you can't really get right up to the edge, or you're having trouble like selecting that, or it's like wiggly or jagged or something like that. Masking is another technique you can use where it's a little bit easier to use, that your model is not disappearing as you're selecting, as you're masking out the parts that you do and do not want. So you can see here, I'm like painting, and if I went too far, right, I can invert my mask and paint backwards as well, right? And I can get, a finer selection, right? Once it's masked, right, let's say this is the part I want to delete. Once I got it fine-tuned, I can press Control W. Control W right now, it looks like it didn't do anything. It looks like it cleared the mask. What it actually does, and if I press Alt F or Control F, okay, never mind. Uh, okay, is it Control Alt F? Alt F? Okay, I don't know. There is, and it's not showing up on my screen, but there's a thing called polygroups in ZBrush. And polygroups are like sort of like a selection tool where you can assign different faces of an object to a different color, and that's its own group, so you can easily turn or hide that on and off. Yes, so what Control W does while it is like what if that part's unmasked is I assigned it a certain color group, and I can now just select that. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. Oh, it's Shift F. Oops. Okay. So to turn on polygroups, I'm going to hit Shift F, and now you'll see, right, that all these faces are like this blue, and all these faces are white. This also turns on wireframe mode, so you'll see how dense your mesh is. I don't recommend turning on polygroups if especially if you're doing like one part at a time, so you know which part you did select. But just for demonstration examples, this is what I've done, right? So if I'm gonna hit Shift F again to turn it off, I'm gonna go back to masking. Let's say I want to mask this part. All right, I'm gonna hit Control W. If I hit Shift F, now you'll see, right? You'll see now this is a different color group. And that's what polygroups are. Once that's a different polygroup, right? If I hit Control Shift, hold Control Shift, and click on that part that I made into a polygroup, come on. Okay, you may need to go into the rectangle tool. Yeah, it should isolate that part while disappearing everything else, and I could invert that and then delete hidden, and there's that part. So there's two ways, right? I can go Control Shift and click and drag, invert, delete hidden, or I can use the masking tool. What am I doing? If you want to clear your mask, you can hold Control and click drag a box. If there is a masking. So I'm going to mask, I'm going to invert, right? I got a little bit over, so I'm going to paint it back in. Control W, Control Shift, click on this, and then I can invert and delete hidden. And then you'll see that I have a little bit of a straggler there. There's that. Now your masking size, your masking brush, you can control that by going up to here, draw size. You can check this. Or a hotkey for that is holding S, and I can adjust my masking size. Okay, so those are the two ways you can start cropping your model accordingly. Once you do that, there are other tools here. So there was delete hidden, we did weld points, we can close holes, and what ZBrush will do is that it'll automatically try to find a hole and close it. So you'll see that this face just appeared. And I recommend if you are going to click close holes, scroll all the way down to this menu to display properties and toggle on double. All right, so what that does is that automatically, when you navigate around your model, ZBrush will detect which way your normals are facing. And normals are basically like if a face has two sides, one is the side where you can see the texture, you can see everything, and the other side is the inside. What ZBrush is doing is that it's only showing one side, the correct side that you're supposed to be viewing, and hiding the other side. Now that's useful when we're sculpting, but when we're, optimizing our model, I prefer to have it on so I know, okay, these are the faces that I've missed and I haven't deleted yet. And you'll see that this is the face that I have missed and haven't deleted yet. So I can delete that by, again, Control Shift. I'm going to change the lasso tool because I'm on an angle. And then I'm going to select that and invert, right? That's selected. And then go back up to geometry and delete hidden. All right, I'm going to quickly grab this one as well. Delete hidden. Okay, so let's say I have this now gaping hole that I made, and I want to fill that up. I just hit close holes. Now that hole is closed, right? And automatically, just as an FYI, when you close a hole, that's assigned a separate polygroup. So what that means is that I can actually, hold Control and Shift and go back to my rectangle tool and just click on it. Right now, it just separates it, and this is the part that ZBrush went in and closed the hole for me. So sometimes that's useful to view if I want to see where the holes were and manage them. Because sometimes, closing holes, it may not look perfect when ZBrush does it. So as long as you hit close holes and you isolate it like this, I can actually see if it has closed the holes as where I want it to be, or it's done something funky. So I want to see everything again. I'm going to hold Control Shift and just let back outside. If you find that your closed hole face is clipping into the object, so now right now you can see that like this bumpy part is my original model, and while this kind of like smooth and flat part is the closed holes operation that ZBrush did, I can actually move that outwards so it's not clipping into each other. And this is what I did with the soil monolith, and that's why on the bottom it's like a little thicker, like a rectangular prism. If I go up here to my move tool, and I'm going to hold Control and just left click on the polygroup, right? What that's going to do, it's going to mask everything except for the polygroup, okay? So once it's done that, right now my gimbal is oriented properly, so that's fantastic. Oh, it's not. If I want my gimbal to be, sort of reset or oriented parallel or perpendicular to the, where the direction I want it to go, I can first hit this, which unlocks the gimbal, which means that I can move this and it won't actually move the model. If I have this locked, if I go and move it, it now, see it's moving everything. So if I want to reorient this, I can just do that manually. Like so. So it is, sort of the direction where I want it to go, and I can lock that again, and then I can pull this out a little bit. Right, so now it's not clipping because I pulled it out, and it has a little bit more of a thickness. And then, I can go back in here and crop whatever. Yeah, and there's also an automatic autosave. I think by default, it's like every 30 minutes or so, it autosaves. Or if you're inactive for 30 seconds, it'll just autosave for you. So that is helpful. If you want to snap to a view while you're rotating, so maybe this is a little annoying, while I'm rotating, so holding right click, I can hold Shift and it'll actually snap to 90-degree angles, right? That's similar to what using this model is doing. It's snapping to 45-degree angles, or using those navigation tools as I mentioned before. Okay, so let's say that's already cropped and that's, I just filled up a hole. Okay, I can go back and hit draw, and I can clear my mask. So holding Control and click and drag. Great, so that was close holes. That's about it. down here for mesh integrity, if I open that up, there's a tool that can check if I have issues. So I just clicked check mesh integrity, and it told me that I have 19 edges that are shared by more than 2 polygons. So that's something that we want to get rid of. We can try to find those and use some of the modified topology tools here, like equalize edge length or things like that. But in mesh integrity, the nifty part is that we can actually ask ZBrush to fix that for us, right? So if we hit fix mesh, it would have done it. So if I check mesh again, see how the error doesn't pop up anymore because ZBrush just went ahead and just fixed it for us, which is nifty. And then I can rotate around to double check it didn't compromise the details of our model. Good. Okay, so that's done. So that's pretty much the fixing your mesh phase or step, right? Once that's done, I'm going to go back up to Subtool, and I'm going to go to Z plugin and make sure that my working model is selected. I'm going to Z plugin, then to Decimation Master. And here is the tool where you use to decimate your model. I'm going to hit, you always want to hit preprocess current if it's a model. Then ZBrush will go ahead and process this, so it takes less time to actually decimate it. The reason why we preprocess current is because then we can actually adjust our decimation quality up or down without too much lag time. So ZBrush is not calculating it; it's like giving us a preview. So I can change this down to maybe I want it down to 10% of the model, right? Then it'll immediately give me those polys, or I want it up higher and it'll immediately give me those polys, that poly count. Just as I mentioned before, if I hover over my model, I can see the poly count currently on my working model. So on my working model, I have 852,000 polys. If I hover over my original, it had about 1 million polys. So just cropping things out, I reduced it by 150,000. We want to reduce it down even more, so going up to Z plugin, I already hit preprocess current. Let's say I want it down to 17%, which is sort of the number that I always go with when I'm decimating, whether in Maya or Blender or whatever. It's telling me that I'll end up with about 144,000 polys. I think that's really manageable. I don't want to see how that looks at the moment, so I'm going to go decimate current, and it's going to go ahead and decimate that for us. Now you'll notice that you'll see that the texture disappeared, but if I hover over my model, it has been decimated. My poly count is now down to 144,000. Let's not worry about the texture right now. Let's focus on our poly count. To me, this looks like it can be reduced even further. This is a simple looking shape and object, and so far it hasn't compromised my details for it yet. I feel like I can go down even lower. So I'm going to go back down here, preprocess current. It's going to recalculate that. And then I'm going to keep it at 17%. Maybe actually I'll go 10% of that. Oh, actually it's 144,000 right now, so maybe I just want half of that. It'll spit out 72,000. All right, decimate current. Yeah, so there's no noticeable difference, and I can go even actually probably a lot lower than that. Yeah, so you can see that it's down to 30,000, and usually for some of the scans that we will have, like bones or soil monoliths, that's a really good size to have because of the amount of detail we want to preserve. But I think for this model, since it's so simple, we can go super low, and that will help. Yeah. Let's do 7,000 polys. Okay, great. So that's looking a lot cleaner, and I think I'm happy with that number. Yeah, 7,000 polys. Great. Now, if I want to get that texture back, right? This is where it is very important to keep our original, and we want it oriented the same way. So, that's why I'm saying that in the very beginning, if you want to reorient your model, you do that in the very beginning with your original, because we want our original sort of overlapping our working model. So it's either you reorient it in the very beginning, or you reorient it at the very end. This will make the texturing process easier. So I'm going to unhide my original model, and you can see that's overlapping and sort of clipping through. Okay, but I have my working model still selected, right? I'm going to go down here to this menu. In the subtool menu, there's a project menu. If you want geometry and color toggled on, and here you can control the settings on what details and what you want to be projected back onto the object, onto the model. So what project or projections do in ZBrush is that basically it grabs whatever visible layer that's not selected, and it'll grab the texture information, it'll grab like any detail information like on the model itself, and then try to stamp it into your current working model. And then it'll do its best doing that. This is similar to the whole transfer attributes in Maya, and this would be the similar way in Blender when you're baking textures, but issues with baking textures. Okay, here specifically, I like changing my PA blur, which is project all blur, down to like 1, because I don't want to lose the detail when I project it. I want to keep as much as possible. So I'm going to turn it down to 1, and then I'm going to hit project all. All right, so pretty quick, and this will depend on your computer. If I hide my original model now, you can see that, okay, so I have texture information on my working model, but it looks a little bit, very blurry and very like low, low res. Wait. Okay, I made a mistake. I forgot one step that is super important to do. When you go into Decimation Master, you want to toggle on Keep UVs. Okay, that's really important because this will allow you to preserve your UVs so your texture map can still read properly. So, because right now I don't have the same UVs, so ZBrush went ahead and tried to paint it per vertice of the texture, which gets like this kind of crazy mess. So I'm going to go back, right? I'm going to delete this model. And just imagine that I already cropped this working model, and I'm going to rename this to working model. Okay, I'm going to Z plugin. I'm going to toggle on Keep UVs, preprocess current, and it's going to do its thing. Great. Awesome. Okay, now here I'm going to change the percentage of my decimation. It was like 7,000 before. I can reduce this percentage until I get where I want it to be. Or I can drag my poly slider down. Or I can start at 7. Cool. All right, cool. Decimate current, and I have keep UVs on. That's important. Great. So my texture is gone. However, I'm going to unhide my original, go down here to project all, change this to 1, make sure my working model is highlighted, project all. I think that worked. Okay, well, maybe we decimated it too low and they can't retain that that color information. So I mean, I could always change that by going higher again. So as long as I didn't press preprocess current because it's right now saved the information that I had before of the actual decimation process. If I were to hit it again, it'll try to decimate it from the current resolution I have my model at. which if I were to do that, I can't go back up. So I'm actually I'm going to raise this higher to maybe, let's say if I had 100,000 polys and then I decimate current, right? So it's actually going to be raising my poly count because it has the previous information stored. I'm going to reproject all, and I get a little bit more of that texture information. Yeah, and that's like a number you're going to have to play with. But yeah, I show this in the other workshop as well, but you know, we can also import our texture, opt-in texture, and then we're going to select our texture, and we're going to hit flip V because ZBrush flips the vertical axes, and then we're going down here to texture map. We're going to click this box, select our texture. Okay, and then there it is. Awesome. Yeah. So, oh, okay. Make sure you have color toggled off. Maybe that's why it was being weird, because ZBrush was trying to implement its own texture. I'm going to turn this texture off. So, you know, this is our gross texture. I'm going to reproject it again, and this time I have color toggled off. I'm going to project all. Okay, never mind. Yeah, okay. If you want to see your texture, just import it in and turn this on, and that's actually what your texture will be viewing. You know, because we're not going to be exporting our own texture from ZBrush, we'll be using the original texture. So as long as, you know, we have keep UVs on and we decimate it, no matter how low we decimate it, as long as the shape is still retained, and I will prove it to you down to 7,000 again. As long as the shape is retained, the UVs aren't changed, which means that if we use the original texture file and see, oh wait, I didn't even turn this on. Yes, you'll see that even when I reduce this down to, what, 97,000 right now, but I will reduce this. How can I reduce it? Okay, well, even if it was lower, it should retain the texture information because if I import my texture map. Okay, so once that is done, it's looking good. You know, it's optimized. I can here at this step, I can reorient my model by going into the move or scale or rotate. I can rotate this up. So I'm going to snap to view where I'm on the side. I'm going to rotate it towards me so it's lying, you know, parallel to the floor, right? And then I am going to hold shift so it's on a 90 degree, and there you go. Now my model is sitting upright. And then I'm going to go over here to export. And I'm going to make a new model. This is going to be Flask optimized model 01. Right, so we have the label name, the optimization, and our version number. Save that. And now it is writing it with Polypaint, so ZBrush will export out a texture map, which I do not want anyway. I'm going to minimize this, and let's open up my File Explorer, my Finder window, and look at that file. Okay, great. So you can see here, this texture file was created by ZBrush based on, you know, the texture file that we imported. You know, I don't recommend using this because it's in BMP, and the original texture file is a higher quality anyway, so I can just delete that. Here, this is the step where it can get confusing. I want to make sure that my .mtl file is pointing to this texture in this folder. So I'm going to right-click over the .mtl. I'm going to open it with Notepad. Right, and here I will see this line of code, mapkd, is pointing to the old texture file that I had. I can just copy and paste this name. I select the whole thing, including the extension. And pasting that in, and then I'm going to save and overwrite that. Great. So now, if I were to, open up Maya or Blender, oh, I didn't see the message from Emma from before. Which part did I cut out, Emma? Or if it's long gone, then I don't know. Okay, okay. Well, I mean, if there are questions, you can, of course, just let me know. So I'm in Maya now. I'm just going to check on my model. I'm going to open it. Oh, sorry, I'm going to import it. And I'm going to navigate to where that model is. Model optimized. Great, so this looks good. And then I'm going to turn on texture view to see, yep, the texture is being read. And that's it. I know you can import the model back into ZBrush and see if that works. And to do that, we want to make a new subtool. We can just do that by pressing like the cylinder here or whatever object that's not your model. This will actually switch your subtool, so you'll see that my versions here are disappeared because it's like it's not a separate file. Well, it is a separate file, but it's not like the project file. It's just a tool. And to import and export models, we're loading and importing tools. So I'm going to load my tool in. All right, I'm going to go. Oh, not my tool. I'm going to import my model, and then I can see that the texture is funky anyway. And I just need to activate my texture that I imported. And this is the original texture, right? And now I can see like, okay, cool. It is working. So that's the whole process and intro to ZBrush. Without me talking it and everything, all in all, it should maybe take you half the time. Like, again, the steps are, once you import your model, right, you duplicate it. You can either decimate it or go down to geometry, modify topology, fix up all these. You can crop some things at this stage as well, delete hidden. Once you like that, then you go to Z plugin, decimation master, preprocess current, find that magic number that reduces your poly count while still retaining that detail. You want to make sure keep UVs is toggled on, and then you go decimate current. Right? Once that is reduced down, your texture will disappear. If you want to bring that texture back, just go to texture, import, find your texture, select that, flip it vertically, right? And then go down here to texture map and load that texture file in here by clicking this box and finding it. Then if that looks all good, you can here choose to orient it if you haven't already done so. And then export your model. Once it's exported, make sure you navigate to that folder and edit the .mtl. And make sure your last line, mapkd, is the file out, the original file texture node. Then you overwrite that, and you can double check by opening your model back into any other 3D software, ZBrush, Blender, Maya. And that's it. That's the whole thing on the whole process in ZBrush. I went over more things in detail that I didn't before. So Emma says, so when we optimize, we don't need to necessarily completely isolate the object. That is dependent on the collaborator's specifications. So, I mean, we don't have any specifications for this Flask model, but I would have presumed that they don't want this kind of platform that's sitting on the bottom, so I would have just cropped that out. If there are no collaborator notes on if they want this bottom platform or not, I like to just assume that, if they're going to be using this model in a teaching environment, it'd be best to get rid of or to optimize it in a way where it's easier to view and look at. So right now, if I was to actually optimize this, I would delete this bottom platform like I did before and fill that hole and make sure the texture information is still good. And then that'll be my model, so I can look under it as well. Does that answer your question? Yes, the best way to fill that hole would be fill hole. There is another function in ZBrush where you can fill holes. It's a little bit longer and sort of finicky. I can go over that real quick. There's a tool called a Z modeler. So I'm going to actually create a hole and show you. So I'm going to Control Shift, hold Control Shift. I'll slice the bottom on purpose like that. Okay, cool. And I'm going to go geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. Okay, so now I have this gaping hole, and I want to make sure I have a hole by I can just go to display properties, hit double. So now I can see, like, okay, so that's a legit hole that I have. So I can either, fill hole with geometry close holes, right? Closed it. Or, I'm going to zoom in here. I click on this, which will probably be your brush menu. Most of these are sculpting tools, but the one that I want is called Z Modeler. So while this menu is open, I can navigate to this alphabet, Z. And down here, there's a Z Modeler. Okay, so awesome, Z Modeler. And how the Z Modeler works is that if I hover over either a vertice, edge, or face, it's a different menu or option. So, I want to fill hole. I can either do that by hovering over the edge or hovering over the face. I'm going to do, for the bridge function, if you want to do it manually, I'm going to hover over an edge, right? So any edge works. So I'm holding over an edge, like that edge is highlighted white. If I hold spacebar, it'll open up my ZModeler options for that property I'm highlighting over. And right now it's set to insert. I can set it to extrude, or I can set it to bridge. And down here, it'll give me the target. Do I want to bridge between edges, or do I want to bridge between two holes? You can do either. They work almost similarly. Edges just mean that when you do pull it out, it'll detect the closest edge. That's like a cross. And then twofold, I think, does something similar. Okay, that's a little more complicated. Let's do edge. So how to use it is that, once that setting is set, I'm going to hover over a edge, right? And it gives me a little tooltip here. And it says, okay, you want to bridge between two edges. Just click on the first edge. So I'm going to click on that. And then I want to bridge it over there. Right, you can just see that. So click first edge, and then I'm going to click my second edge. And that's how you bridge. If you want to do multiple edges at once, right, I'm hovering over an edge, holding space. I think it is the two holes, should be. And select. So let's see what we can do with the default. Let's click first hole. and click second edge and drag to reshape. What? I'll click second hole and drag to reshape. What? Okay, never mind. Never mind. Forget about it. Forget about it. Anyways, it's complicated, and you can get finer detail with that, like individually. But I mean, the easiest operation is this close hole, and then you have that. And then from here, you can modify this to the shape that you want. So you'll see this jaggedness. Okay, so I'm going to go over the sculpting tools, I guess. If I want to smooth this jaggedness, I can actually go to my, you can go to smooth brush or a standard brush, and if I hold shift, I'm going to raise my brush size. I hold shift, it'll actually smooth out my model, so it's less jagged. See that? I don't recommend using these tools too often because you'll see that when I'm smoothing this, my texture is moving around. And you could, transfer the texture like how we're using the project all function, but then, you would not be using the original texture. You would be using the texture that gets exported with it. And in that case, you do want to keep the texture that ZBrush gives you, and that's the texture you're going to transfer into the folder with your optimized model. Right? So just as a heads up, if you do use this. So right now, see, like it's a lot smoother now. I don't have the color information down here, but if I go up, okay. I reoriented this model so it's different. Oh, wait, okay, no, good. That's perfect, great. I have this selected. And I'm going to go down to project all. I'm going to toggle off color just to see how it looks like. It might not work, but let's just try that. So it's going to project all. I'm going to hide this and see. Okay, yeah, it didn't really transfer anything. So I'm going to turn on color and unhide my original, project all, and I'll see on the bottom. Okay, it didn't really transfer anything, but yeah. Why is it transferring anything? Oh, it's because I have my texture map on. So it's just grabbing my original texture, which I do not want. We'll turn that off. And then I might have to raise the resolution of this model. So it's a little bit finicky, I guess. If I want my model to have a higher poly count, retaining whatever color information that's not being supported with, and you already went a couple steps through and you already decimated it, you could raise the poly count by subdividing it, and you can do that by going to geometry. Right, yeah, default geometry. If I hit divide, right? So what divide will do, I'm going to go and hide my original model, is that it just divides everything by 2. So now I have 203,000 polys, where it was before it was like 100,000. And now this time I should have a lot more faces and vertices where I can control the colors being projected. So it looks like it's still a little blurry, but it's getting a little bit better. I can keep raising this, but then I don't know, it becomes a little convoluted because you're raising the poly count back up just to get that texture back in with your own texture. So for the most part, you don't want to move your UVs. Hence, you don't want to use the sculpting tools too much. You can do it a little bit just to adjust it. Because I think beforehand what I did didn't look too bad, actually. But yeah, that's pretty much all we'll be doing with ZBrush. And if it is confusing or you find that it's not as accurate as like some of the other tools, you can go back to Blender or Maya. ZBrush was pretty much only meant to be used to decimate things quicker because its algorithm is a little bit quicker than Maya or Blender's, and also to it does a better job of cleaning up your mesh in terms of like filling holes or any artifacts, things that, and it should be better at transferring textures, because for at least for Blender, even though this is sort of finicky, yeah, it retains your UVs. Anyways, so that's it. And if you guys have a little bit of time, I'm just going to go over some updates. I'm gonna stop the recording. These off the books.